Hello, blessings and greetings to you all. It's the 23rd of May 2020, and I'm here to share with you dreams and visions that the Lord has shown me in recent months about the COVID-19 crisis. I was given the go-ahead to share this morning, and I'm going to be covering several months' worth of dreams and visions. So I will skip through them as quick as I can to try and make the video not too long, but also I really just want to I want this video to give the glory to Jesus, to give the Lord Almighty in heaven praise that he shows us things that we know nothing about. And I think very much of the verse in Jeremiah 33:3 that says, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things that thou knowest not." Because indeed he does. And I want to just show you how he does this. On February the 28th, the first vision I received in this group was of several, I would say 4 to 5 elderly gentlemen staggering around with handkerchiefs over their mouths and noses. They were staggering because they were unwell, and I knew immediately that they were afraid, and I knew they were infected with the COVID-19 virus. In my diary, I made an entry saying that I thought these gentlemen were between the ages of 70 and 80. Now, I wrote these things down after I awoke, and that morning there were no cases of COVID-19 in the country where I live, New Zealand, but in the recent weeks before that, it was starting to move from China and infecting other countries in the world. Now, the interesting thing was that by that afternoon, the New Zealand Prime Minister announced the first case in our country. So in the morning, there were no cases, but the Lord gave me this vision, and by the afternoon, the first case had been discovered. The other thing was, because the Lord had shown me elderly gentlemen, I thought I must look up the World Health Organization statistics and see which age group were being most badly affected by the virus, because this was very early on, brothers and sisters, and I didn't know. I had no idea what people were suffering most from this virus. When I looked it up, I found that indeed it was the elderly gentlemen, men, that were dying of this disease. And just to show you that this continues, I want to show you something I found tonight, just an hour or so ago. I looked at the statistics in New York. And as you can see at the top of the page, it says New York City, and it's May the 13th, these stats were put out. And as you look at the columns under the number of deaths, it's the 75-year-olds plus that have the highest numbers by far. 48.7% of the deaths were ages 75 years and plus. The nearest closest group was the 65 to 74-year-olds, and that was 24.9%. So it's that elderly bracket that is way more affected. Now, the other thing was that the Lord showed me men. So I wanted to see the statistics for gender. So here are the statistics for gender, and this is again New York City Health, April the 14th. And you can see here that the males, their share of deaths was 61.8%, well above the females, which was 38.2%. So what the Lord showed me when I wrote down in my diary that I felt the men were between 70 and 80 years old, and they were men. You can see from the statistics that yes, indeed, that is the case. And so all glory to God. He knew, and he is true to his word. He showed exactly the right thing. Now moving on to the next vision that I was given. This was the next vision I was given on this particular subject, and it was on the 15th of April 2020. And I apologize for this poor photo, but this is actually a picture of hot oil in a frying pan. And as you can see, you have that clear, sizzling hot picture here. But as I looked at the frying pan, the odd thing that happened was it was as if the gas had been turned off and that the pan was cooling, and I could see a layer of fat moving across the frying pan underneath the oil, and it was creeping across the pan, slowly solidifying, but I could also see that there was oil on top. And I felt in myself as I saw this vision that it would only take someone to put, or Almighty God, to put the gas back on, the heat back on, and this oil, this fat would soon melt and it would be sizzling hot again. Now, I felt this was an indication that the numbers of COVID-19 in some countries were beginning to drop and people were becoming optimistic that we were getting on top of the virus. Now, remembering everyone that this is back in April, and indeed that's what was happening. But as I said, I felt it would only take God to turn the heat back on and that oil would be sizzling again. So just moving on then to a few nights later, where I saw a vision of initially of a card with dried flowers on it. Now, I wasn't sure what this was meaning, but I just wanted to tell you that because it may represent those that have passed away. Just as when you dry a plant, you preserve some of its natural beauty and it lasts, and it's preserved and it's displayed on a card. Well, perhaps the Lord was showing us that he wants to preserve the beauty of those that have passed, the souls that have passed with the COVID-19 virus. That's the only thing I could think of as to why I saw this vision first. But as I move on, you will see there's so much more to come for this particular night in April. I apologize everyone for the poor lighting. It is night time. But here you are. These are the words I heard next. The first words I heard was lists of numbers falling and calling for social and cultural change. And after that I heard let them rest. Now I couldn't believe it, because what strange words for the middle of the night. Just so odd. Lists of numbers falling, and I knew he meant that the numbers of cases of COVID-19 were beginning to fall, just as I said with the hot pan, and people were getting reassured or falsely assured that we were getting on top of the virus, but that was not so. Just as that pan could be turned back on and the heat would go on and that it would be sizzling again, people were getting falsely optimistic. But then I heard calling for social cultural change. And how correct is that? Because during this whole process, that is exactly what has been happening. The leaders of the different countries around the world, the global elite, are using this as an opportunity to have change in our structure of society. Socially, we have been locked away, we've been isolated. And culturally, well, churches have been unable to meet. Families have been unable to bury their dead properly. They've not been able to be with their loved ones when they've been sick. There's just been so many social and cultural changes. And now they're talking about vaccines and apps that track us. So many changes, brothers and sisters. But what was the last thing the Lord said? He said, let them rest. And I believe he was speaking of those that have passed away and those that are mourning. And the reason I say this is because the next vision I received that night was of flowers. They were agapanthus flowers, and I'm going to show you what they look like. So these are agapanthus. They've got a great big head. They're a large flower with a really large head, and they've got a long, thin stem. And what I saw were these agapanthus on the back of a tip truck. And the tip truck was backing back, and these flowers had been picked, and I saw the stems and the heads of the flowers tumbling off the back of the tip truck onto the ground. And I knew that these flowers represented those that had died of the Covid-19 virus. And brothers and sisters, I know that agapanthus is a word that is stems from Greek origin, and the agapanthus symbolize love, and not just any love, it's God's love, because the word root is agape, and agape is God's love. So brothers and sisters, isn't God incredible that he would give me pictures of agapanthus, because this is just showing you how much he loves those who have fallen victim of this virus. Just so you can see that what I'm saying is correct. Here you can see here that under the word origin it says New Latin from Greek agape, love. Now that night, everyone, there was one more word, and the word was this: Russell Warren Outbreak. And when I first got it, I thought, what is this? What does the Lord want me to do? Does he want me to look up the meaning of Russell and Warren? But that didn't seem right. And so, brothers and sisters, what I did was I put in Russell Warren Outbreak New Zealand, and I got an amazing story. Now this is the article I found, and I was just blown away by this, because the Lord has used this as a means of giving me confirmation that the earlier visions I received that night were indeed about the COVID-19 virus. So brothers and sisters, I've just done a little summary in my diary, so while I'm showing you this particular page, I'll read what I've written in my diary. So the article, when I looked it up, it revealed that this man, Mr. Russell, he was a prominent politician during the years of World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic in New Zealand and around the world. And in 1918, when New Zealand was struck with this most terrible global pandemic, he was the Minister of Public Health and Internal Affairs. He had to decide whether to let a passenger ship called the Niagara to dock, whether the ship would dock, and whether he would quarantine those on board or whether he would let them out. And what he did in the end, with the advice of the medics, was he let the passengers of the ship enter New Zealand. And unfortunately, this led to the spread of the Spanish flu. And it was the worst pandemic that New Zealand has ever faced. And I'm pretty sure there were millions that died around the world. But in New Zealand, the statistics were 6,091 Europeans and 2,160 Maori people died. Now, I knew nothing of this, brothers and sisters. I didn't know this person. I had heard of the Spanish flu, and I knew there were many people that died in New Zealand of it, but I didn't know this history. And the Lord just blew me away when He showed me this man's name, and I found this article. And I'm going to show you a picture of the Niagara. So everyone, this is the Niagara, the ship that came into New Zealand and wanted to dock, and this is where the passengers came off this ship and the flu pandemic spread. Now, doesn't that just remind you so much of what's happening right now? So many cruise ships have been responsible for the spread of this COVID-19 disease. The outbreaks have started on the ships, then the ships have come into port and the passengers have got off, and that is the way that the COVID-19 really spread in Sydney, Australia, with the Ruby Princess. Many other cruise ships have been quarantined out at sea or out in harbours, and the passengers have not been allowed to come off the ships, and the disease has just spread throughout the passengers on board. So, brothers and sisters, what an amazing coincidence, some may say. I don't believe so. I believe this is an amazing confirmation from the Lord that He is putting His stamp on this particular night of dreams and visions. So just going over it, He gave us the picture of the dried flowers on the card, and then He gave us the words lists of numbers falling and calling for social cultural change, and then He gave us the words, let them rest. He cares so much for those that have died, who have passed away because of this terrible disease. But He is in control. He knows all that is coming to pass. And the fact that those flowers came tumbling off a tip truck onto the ground, does that mean there are going to be higher numbers of deaths where people are unable to be buried with dignity? So, brothers and sisters, this is just a video dedicated to the Lord to say thank you. Thank you for giving us knowledge that is just beyond any means of us as simple human beings to even begin to know these great and mighty things that the Lord has shown. So here we are, Jeremiah 33:3. Call unto me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you know not. And at the bottom, somebody has written, Jesus is always listening. All you have to do is call out to Him. He will answer, brothers and sisters. Throughout all this, and throughout all the fear and all the worry of this pandemic, Jesus is in control. He knows everything that is happening, and He cares about us all. Bye for now, brothers and sisters.